songs are led that I have to look at my wife and go, do we know this song? She says, yeah, you do. And then it's at least banging around in there somewhere because I have to focus and I have to pay attention to what we're doing and be more involved. And so I enjoy that, and I appreciate the singing this morning. Thank you all for being here. So suppose this morning, and I need the clicker again, that I send you guys all out on an assignment. I want you guys to leave here this morning and go into the world, and I want you to find 4 animals that you think best illustrate or exemplify the idea of wisdom. What is it you guys think you would come back with? Maybe somebody would come back with an elephant. They are, they seem to be thoughtful. They are purported to remember a whole bunch of things. They live a long time so that they can gather all of this wisdom. That might be a good choice. Somebody's got to bring back an owl, right? That's the de facto wisdom symbol, at least as far back as, 1970 when that commercial came out for Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pops? Maybe slightly farther back than that. It's been the symbol. Perhaps some of you have thought of a dolphin. You went to the sea for your inspiration. You thought of a dolphin or a whale or maybe an octopus, because those things are scary smart. The stuff that they find them able to figure out and get out of, and there's some wisdom there. Those will all be good choices. But I'm thinking that probably nobody is going to, or very few people anyway, are going to come up with the animals that are on this list that I'm about to give you, except for maybe Rob and Jim, who saw my slides. What do you think of an ant, a rock badger, a locust, and a lizard? Anybody come up with those 4? If you did, you're in good company. Because Agur, the guy who wrote Proverbs 30, did exactly that. He went out into the world and he looked around, and he says in 24 of that chapter, 4 things are small on the earth, yet they are exceedingly wise. Not just wise, these 4 things I just listed for you are exceedingly wise. And again, it wouldn't have been where my mind first went if you asked me that question. The other thing that's sort of interesting about that comment is he starts with, they're small. All these things are small. That's important because what we don't have on this list is a lion or a bear or an eagle or maybe a buffalo, something like that. No, he starts with a weakness or a limitation for these 4 creatures. First off, they're small, and then each one of them gets their own description of how it is that they are in some way limited. And what you see in the, and I got to get to the picture. There you go. There's our cast of characters for this morning. And what you see when you look at each one of them as you go through them, and you can watch for this as we read into the text in more depth in a moment, but what you see is that the ant, he's not strong. The rock badger is not mighty. The locust has no king. And the lizard can be picked up in your hands. You've got weakness, vulnerability, no leader, tiny. These are the things that are listed as limitations for this 4 group set of animals we're talking about this morning. But here's the really cool thing about this proverb. It doesn't say that they let that limitation beat them. These animals are successful in spite of their limitation because they all have their own answer to it. The ant has provision, the rock badger has sanctuary, the lizard has audacity, and the locust has order. That's how they overcome the limitations that they've got in their life. And the other really cool thing is that it doesn't tell us that those limitations ever went away. The ant doesn't ever become strong. The rock badger doesn't ever become mighty. The locust, poor guy, never gets a king. And the lizard, he's still tiny and you can pick him up and put him in your hands. And yet they're all still exceedingly wise. And so maybe what we're going to learn about wisdom this morning is that wisdom is not pretending you don't have limitations. Maybe wisdom is learning what to do in spite of those limitations. And so as we move forward this morning, let's pick up with this first guy in the picture here, the ant. Let's dig into his story a little bit. And in Proverbs 30:25, it reads like this: the ants are not strong people, but they prepare their food in the summer. Nobody is intimidated by an ant. And again, notice that in this individual section here, the limitation is given first. They're not strong people. If I'm walking down the path in the forest and an ant comes across my trail, I'm not stopping. I'm not backing up and going, oh, there's an ant in the road. Nobody does that. An individual ant is tiny. You can end its life with your pinky finger. And the proverb doesn't pretend that that's anything other than fact. The ant isn't strong. But they prepare their food in the summer. There's its answer. Provision. The ant can't control what's going on around it. It can't control the seasons. But it recognizes them. It understands them. Summer is not going to last forever. Food is available right now. And so the ant gathers. The ant lives in this present day with an awareness of the future, but he knows he can't control it. And I think we're not always very good at that as humans, living in this present moment. How many problems in your life have begun with this idea of, I'll deal with that later. I'll see you later. I'll fix that later. I'll get serious about my spiritual life later. I'll stop that habit later. I'll have that hard conversation later. Later is a wonderful place. I can just stick everything over there and then I don't have anything else to do today. I'm going to do that later. You could put all kinds of things in there, into later. But the ant doesn't live there. Summer is here now. Winter is coming, so get moving. Wisdom understands this. And so those opportunities that are available now, the ant says they're not always going to be available. As parents, we all understand this eventually. When the children are little, we think, there's a never-ending supply of bedtimes and story times and getting them ready for this, that, and the other things. There's always going to be one more of those. There'll be another dinner. There'll be another Saturday. Another ride in the car. But then somehow those years pass. And they pass quickly. They pass too fast. They grow up and they're gone. And those things that you could try and instill in them when they were 8 are much harder to do when they're 18 or beyond and no longer in your life every single day. Relationships that are in need of repair are much easier to repair now as opposed to letting them go. I'll do that later. And 5 years of resentment is built up. That's a much harder place to get past. Spiritual habits, they're so much easier to develop now as opposed to when that crisis arrives and you're facing difficulty. You've already built something to fall back on. They're so much easier to put the scriptures in your heart when things are going well, not when they're turbulent and now all of a sudden you need to go, oh, what was that verse I need to rely on? What was that piece of advice that was there? I can't find it. And this isn't something that only we learn from the ant. Paul writes about this. He says in Ephesians 5:15 and 16, therefore be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, making the most of your time. Do you see the connection between wisdom and time there? A wise person recognizes that there's a value in the opportunity that's in front of him. He says something similar in Galatians 6:10. So then, while we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. While we have opportunity. Why is that important? Because opportunities have a shelf life. There are people that we can encourage now. There are people that we can teach now. Relationships that we can strengthen. Good we can do now. Because now, if we don't act on that, eventually becomes, I wish I had. I wish I had spoken to that person. I wish I had made up with my father. I wish I had done all of these things. And that's a terrible place. The ant doesn't know the future. He just simply looks around him, recognizes what season he's in, and does what he does. He prepares. And so provision asks, what can I do today that I will be thankful for tomorrow? That's what we learn from the ant. So our second little creature here, this rock badger, your version probably has this word in it, the Shephanim, I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry, are not mighty people, yet make their houses in the rocks. And that could be translated in yours as coney or rock badger or hyrax. They're all this tiny, small creature, somewhat about the size of a rabbit, maybe. And when danger approaches, they disappear into the rocks. Turn and run right back into the rocks. Again, limitation first. They are not mighty. This animal was not built to win fights. Imagine a predator approaching this rock badger. He's standing up. You know how they do? They stand up and they look around. And he decides, you know what? Today I am going to stand my ground. I'm not going anywhere. I'm tired of you harassing me. I'm going to just stand here and fight whatever comes. That is a brave rock badger for 15 seconds. He's not built for that. What should he do? He runs into the rocks. And that is his take on wisdom. His answer to weakness is sanctuary. The rock badger understands something that we don't sometimes. You don't have to be stronger than your enemy if your sanctuary, your refuge, if that is. In this country in particular, we admire self-sufficiency. I mean, that's almost it's indicative of what it is to be an American. I don't need your help. I'm going to do all of this on my own. I can handle it. I've got this. We say that as an encouragement to others. You've got this. In other words, you don't need my help, which is sometimes true, but it's that mindset. I don't need anybody. But sometimes the wisest sentence a person can say is, I'm not strong enough for this. I need help. And we tend to hear that, particularly through our American ears, as defeat. But it's simply a reality sometimes. And once I admit that I'm not strong enough, I can finally ask the question that the rock badger has already answered for me. Where are the rocks? Where are the rocks? Where am I supposed to go for this refuge if I'm not strong enough to do this on my own? Scripture repeatedly describes God as a rock, a refuge, a fortress, a stronghold. There's a tremendous difference between saying, I am strong, and saying, my refuge is strong, particularly when we're talking about the God who created everything you see. Again, if we look to the New Testament and Paul, he tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:22, he says, now flee from youthful lust. Not stand there and demonstrate how spiritually mature you are, Timothy. Flee from that. Again, in 1 Corinthians 10:13, Paul says that when temptation comes, God will provide the way of escape also, so that you'll be able to endure it. And so sometimes what it is that God provides is the exit. We need to be wise enough to take it. There's something almost humorous about the idea of this rock badger refusing to enter the rocks that are right there, that he can disappear in and never have a problem, because he wants to demonstrate courage. Use the rocks. That's why they're there. So again, spiritual maturity isn't reaching the point where you never need an escape route. It's recognizing when God has provided one for you. And ultimately, our sanctuary isn't merely an escape from something. Hebrews 6:18 describes believers as those who have fled for refuge in laying hold of the hope set before them. Fled for refuge. They did not just flee danger, they fled for refuge. That's our rock badger. It knows what it isn't. It knows what the predator is, and most importantly, it knows where the rocks are. So when you find yourself in that position, don't stand there if you know you're not prepared for this and wait for the eagle or whatever it is to swoop down and carry you off. Pray. Call somebody. Ask for help. Remove yourself from the temptation. Lean on the brethren. Open the scriptures. There is no shame in needing sanctuary. And so sanctuary asks, when I'm not strong enough, when I discover that I'm not strong enough, do I know where to run? I hope like the rock badger you do. Teacher number 3, our locust. The locusts have no king, yet all of them go out in ranks. Proverbs 30:27. Again, limitation. They have no king, no visible commander, no locust general with his tiny little sword, as Madison talked about, no organizational chart or committee meeting that they go to and get instructions. Nobody says, okay, everyone, let's stay together. It's time to go. They have no king. Yet it says they go out in ranks. And so their answer is order. They don't require someone standing over them constantly, directing every single movement of theirs. They know what to do. And they move together. Mature people don't always need someone telling them to do what they already know needs to be done. We understand this intuitively, particularly with our children. You start out, you're constantly telling them, put your shoes on, brush your teeth, take a bath, pick up after yourself, all of those things. Just do your homework. Didn't I just tell you to stop doing that? But part of growing up is hoping that at some point they're going to take that thing on for themselves. And you won't have to say, you should probably shower, Johnny. eventually they will see what needs to be done and start doing it. And hopefully the same thing happens for us spiritually as we grow in our faith. Because there's there's two ways that often goes when you're talking about Christianity. There's people who need constant pushing. You have to ask, you have to remind, you have to say something to them. Do this. We really need you to do this thing. And then there's the ones who don't need to be reminded of anything. They're the people you think of when you come into the building and you know that it's been cleaned and you go, oh, I know that Paul did that. When you come in and this thing has been handled, this person has been reached. They don't need to be told. They notice what others don't always do. And so the locust, he doesn't move alone. He moves in ranks. They go out together, is what it says there. But one locust, because again, one locust isn't impressive by himself. Thousands of them moving together are another matter, as you can kind of see in this image here. The effectiveness is in the order of the group. Everybody has a place. Everybody moves together for the same goal. Again, if you look to Paul in the New Testament, in 1 Corinthians 12, he describes the church as a body made up of all these different parts. And then he says, I didn't get that on the screen, but it says, but now he has placed the members, each one of them in the body just as he desired. That's order. The eye doesn't need to become the hand. The foot doesn't need to become the hand. Every part needs to fulfill what it was designed to do. Ephesians 4:16 describes the body being built up according to the proper working of each individual part. I like that phrase, each individual part. Everybody doesn't have to do everything, but everybody can do something and should be doing something according to what we're reading there. You all have a function in the body. What could a congregation do where no one had to be chased? Someone is hurting, and so you move. Someone needs encouraging, and so someone moves in that direction. Young Christian needs guidance. You move in that direction. A visitor walks in alone, and so we all move back there to talk to that visitor. A brother begins drifting. We move. The locust has no king standing over it, but it knows where it belongs, and so it moves. And now I understand we have a king. Don't get me wrong. We are under a king. But this is talking more about that mindset within the body, not the fact that we don't have a king. And so order asks, do I know my place among God's people? And am I moving with them? Do I know what my job is? Am I doing my part to do that for this group? Now we get to my favorite. Get to the lizard. 30:28, it says, the lizard you may grasp with your hands, yet it is in king's palaces. Again, limitation. You can catch this tiny thing with your hands. It's tiny, it's vulnerable, it's easily caught. That's not a very impressive resume. And yet it lives in kings' palaces. His answer to weakness is audacity. Think about a king's palace for a second. The walls, the doors, the guards, the servants, the security, filled with important people. It's designed to keep people who don't belong there out. You don't just walk into a king's palace. You don't just find yourself in his bedroom randomly. But apparently nobody explained that to the lizard. There it is on the wall. Nobody invited it, no credentials, no appointments. It didn't know somebody who knew somebody to get him in. Small enough you can catch it in your hand, and yet somehow he made it into the palace. You don't belong here. Clearly, the lizard didn't ask. That's audacity. And we allow our limitations to decide where we're permitted to go often, I think, is what we're supposed to learn from the lizard. We think things like, that's a little early. I could never do that. I'm not talented enough for this. I'm too old. I'm too young. I don't know enough. I've never done anything like that before. Somebody else will be better. Somebody else will be way better than that at me. And sometimes those are honest assessments of our limitations. I'm not equipped to jump out of an airplane by myself without somebody guiding me on how to put on the parachute, pull the thing, when to pull it, all of those things. And if I do that on my own before I'm ready for that, that's a limitation I should probably respect. But sometimes those are excuses dressed up as humility. There's a difference between knowing your limitations and letting your limitations determine your usefulness. And again, this is where we get a New Testament connection here. Especially, I feel like this is an especially powerful one because Paul tells the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 1:26, for consider your calling, brethren, that there were not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. Not mighty, not noble, not impressive by the world's standards. And look at what God did through them. Acts 4:13 tells us that the Jewish rulers looked at Peter and John and recognized them as uneducated and untrained men. But they also recognized their confidence. And then it says, they begun to recognize them as having been with Jesus. They saw that confidence. They saw the audacity in those people to keep preaching out in that name. Not arrogance, not pretending to know something that we don't know. It's the confidence to say, I may be small, but God can still use me. God has always accomplished significant things through what does not at first appear significant. A shepherd boy, Gideon's shrinking army, a widow's coin, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, the mustard seed, uneducated fisherman from Galilee, a baby in a manger. We see large and we assume important, and we see small and we see, well, that's got to be insignificant. But Proverbs says, look at the lizard. Small enough to hold in your hand, but he's living in a palace. And so audacity asks, what could I accomplish if I stop believing I'm small? Let's put all that together. Got all 4 of them together up there on the screen. The ant, provision, Paul says, make the most of your time. The badger, sanctuary, Paul says, flee, take the way of escape when it's provided to you. The locust has order. Paul says God has placed each member in the body for a specific purpose. Figure out what that is. The lizard, we've got audacity, where Paul says, God has chosen the weak things of the world. And suddenly all 4 of these little creatures don't seem so little anymore, do they? They illustrate the principle that runs right through our life as a Christian. All 4 point towards the same surprising truth. God doesn't require us to have 0 weakness. He teaches us how to live wisely with them. The ant, again, doesn't become strong. He prepares. The badger doesn't become mighty. He finds the sanctuary. The locust doesn't get his king. He just lives with order. And the lizard doesn't become impressive or hard to catch. He just goes into the palace anyway. And maybe Paul gives us the perfect New Testament sentence to place beneath this whole lesson when he says in 2 Corinthians 2:10, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." Not because weakness itself is strength, but because recognizing weakness changes where we look for strength. And so maybe the question isn't, what weakness do I need to get rid of before God can use me? Maybe it's, given the limitations I have, what would wisdom have me do? Every one of us has something on the left side of the butt. Small butt. I'm not strong enough. I'm not experienced enough. I don't know enough. I can't control this. I'm afraid. I'm limited. Fine. Proverbs doesn't require any of us to deny that. The question is, what comes after your butt? I'm not strong, but I can prepare. I'm vulnerable, but I know where to go. I know where my refuge is. I can't do everything, but I can faithfully take my place alongside God's people. I'm small, but that doesn't mean God can't use me. It doesn't mean I have to stay outside the palace walls. Maybe I need provision, sanctuary, order, and audacity in my life. And there's one final thing worth noticing. These creatures don't merely teach us something about ourselves, they're telling us something about our Creator. Because the one who created the ant created him with the instinct to prepare. The one who gave the rock badger his instinct to hide in the rocks is the same one who gave the locust a sense of order and the lizard the audacity to overcome all the things that come into his life that he just walks right past, doesn't see as a limitation. Wisdom points towards the Creator. This wisdom does. God has filled his world with lessons for us to follow and see. Some of them are enormous. You can't go outside and not see the hand of God in mountains and the ocean and the stars and all of those things. But apparently some are so small that we can walk right past them without noticing. And so the next time you see an ant in the sidewalk, maybe don't step on your teacher. Take a moment and observe him. If you see a lizard on the wall, remember, he got there. And then ask yourself, what is my limitation and what is wisdom's answer to it? 4 things are small on the earth, but they are exceedingly wise. And so wisdom starts at the point of realizing that God sent his Son so that we could have the opportunity to have our sins forgiven us if we are obedient to what has been asked of us, that we accept him as the Savior who is the only way to deal with your sins. And if you are here this morning and you still need to take that step, you need to step into that bit of wisdom that is there for you, we offer you the opportunity to do that as we stand this morning and sing the song that's been selected. And I don't think it's on the board, it's only in the books, is that correct?